Okay.
This is the last week, video.
No, this ain't the last week. Good night. So, right. Chapter 16's taken a while to sort of get sorted out, because as I was looking at the verse 13 and 14, I thought, bang, I have to throw on the brakes here because there's so much going on in these particular verses. But we'll read the verses that are after that, just for the context. I would say we'll probably be in this for another at least 2 weeks. So, anyway, we've been having loads of fun, So, it's all uploaded, all available. Okay, so this is about entitled "Take the Stand," and because it's what Paul is doing is he's wrapping things up and bringing a conclusion to the really the overall teaching that has been going on in the last 15 chapters, which has been quite a lot. So what we'll do is we'll look at what I would call encouragement. So in 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13 to 18, just read those verses. But we'll only be covering today verse 13 and 14, but again, just to get the context of things. So it says, watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong, let all that you do be done with love. And I urge you, brethren, you know the household of Stephanas, that is the first fruits of Achaia, and that they have devoted themselves to the ministry of the saints, that you also submit to such, and to everyone who works and labors with us. And I'm glad about the coming of Stephanas, for Tunitus and Achaicus, for what was lacking on your part, they supplied, for they refreshed my spirit and yours. Therefore, acknowledge such men. So anyway, we're looking at this, the verse 13 and 14 initially, but just to sort of give a passing comment about Stephanas and all these sorts of people. We'll look at them later on, because I think it's important to look at these different men and also households, because it talks about this this household of Stephanas, that he was they were the first fruits of a particular area that were converted to Christ, and how they devoted themselves and so on. So I like what Paul does, because he's very, very interested in people, and he loves people. He loves what loves to see what God is doing in their lives. I've had lots of conversations with different people here of late, and despite a lot of death and heartache that I've been sort of faced up to with the last week or so, God has been doing great things amongst a lot of people, and it's wonderful to see just how people are getting on with it. They're trusting the Lord with their lives, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and benefiting from that. So, and as I say to people sometimes, there's no blessing in doing what's wrong, So, but what I want to do here, before we launch into kind of individual words or individual phrases, because in verse 13 and 14, there's 5 different what I would call exhortations. Now, an exhortation is just a fancy word for the word encouragement, okay? But an exhortation is a strong encouragement. It's like, do this. This is, really, really important. So there's 5 of them in this passage here. The first one is watch. The second one is stand fast in the faith. The third one is be brave. The fourth one is be strong. And then the 5th one is let all that you do be done with love. So those are the 5 exhortations. And now, again, as we've talked about, very, very easy just to go and slide over these things and just read it very quickly and go, yeah, that sounds good, great, super. But when you put the brakes on, look at it and see what's really being said, you go, no, I need to do these things, because the Bible is exhorting me, it's encouraging me to do this stuff. So, but I want to look at this in different versions of the Bible, because as we all know, there's loads of other English versions. And I think sometimes it's helpful to look at other versions. because sometimes the phrases get worded a little bit differently, which is fine. You know, there's no problem with that. So some of the other versions of this particular verse in the ESV, it says, "Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong." Okay, so one of the phrases that seems to be quite different there is instead of being brave, it's acting like men. Now, so you might say to yourself, boy, that's a fair difference in terms of the translation. You know, acting like men, being brave. Yes, you could probably see the connection, but we'll dig into what the original language indicates so that we get this right. So, and then in the NIV, it says, "Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong." Okay, so you know, a couple of different sorts of lines there. You know, and instead of where the New King James says, you know, watch, you know, it's saying be on your guard. You know, so that's you know, adds just that little bit of flavor to the thing. So it's not just a you know, kind of going, you know, looking out there. You know, it's being on guard, which means that you are very vigilant and that you're, you know, keeping your eyes really open. You know. The NASB, which is the New American Standard Bible, which was the version that my dad and I sort of grew up on back in the 70s, because the church that we attended was you know, their pew Bible was that particular version, and it says, "Be on the alert." So there's another word there. So we got, you know, watch, guard, alertness. So stand firm in the faith. It seems to be a pretty stock standard line there. Act like men, be strong. The Holman Christian Standard Bible, which you don't find too many of, you'll find it no problem in Christian bookshops and that kind of thing, but it's not a popular version in terms of, but it is a very good version. It says, "Be alert, stand firm in the faith, act like a man, be strong." So it's interesting there. Instead of, you know, act like men, you know, it says act like a man. You know, so now it's a little bit more contemporary. So, you know, when we have people that say, you know, you need to grow up, you need to act like a man, you know, so, you know, we sort of get that kind of language. And then the good old Authorized Bible, the King James Version, it says, "Watch ye, stand fast in the faith, quit you like men, and be strong." So anyway, I can see from reading this particular version how, you know, you see that line that says, "Quit you like men." Yeah. So yeah, that's hard to get your head around. So that's why it's good to go and read other versions of the Bible. It's like, oh, right, okay, so that makes sense. The NLT, which is the New Living Translation, which when you do read the NLT, it is very, very different. Okay, so and that's why I would read it alongside of you know, another what I would call a formal equivalency version of the Bible, which would be the likes of the New King James, the NAS, those kinds of things, which are word for word translations. The NIV and the NLT tend to be more kind of idea for idea, thought for thought translation. They're more dynamic. So
Just quit you like men, what does that mean?
well,
I know what it means.
yeah.
But how do you take that?
Well, I think in sort of 1611 sorts of understandings, you have to realize that the King James was translated 400 and some odd years ago, and so how they understood that word "quit" would have been, you know, the idea of, if, you know, they didn't think of quit like, okay, we're stopping doing something. It was quit like you stand firm. You know, okay, you know, instead of moving, you're planting yourself. So you've quit moving, but it's not for the purpose of just going, you know.
Quit doing that, or what they're saying is stop doing that.
Yeah.
Ever see someone says, "Quit that"?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Stop.
Yeah, so, you know, yeah, like you, I go,
I mean, it's just that the language changes
Yes,
over the years.
yeah.
I mean, they're talking there in King James Bible about aliens,
yeah.
which
yeah,
doesn't mean foreigners. It
Yeah.
means, when we talk
You know,
about
I-
aliens, I think somebody comes from
Yeah.
outer space.
Yeah.
so, now I remember in Ballyards one time, a man came up to me who had a King James Bible. Now, we would have taught out of more modern versions, but the man came up to me and he says, "I didn't know unicorns were real." Now, in the Psalms, it does talk about unicorns. And, now I can understand how somebody who's uninformed would look at that and say, "Are you for real?" Is the Bible saying that there's horses with, one horn sticking out of its head? Now, what you have to understand is where the word unicorn comes from. Okay, the word unicorn is kind of a what do they call that? Sort of a messed up wording in the sense of the word unihorn, meaning one horn. Okay, so uni is one, that's why it's called a unicorn, is because uni means one. All right, but the corn bit was really a misread of the word horn. So it was unihorn, and there was an animal back then called an ox. So if you read it in more modern translations, it refers to an ox, not a unicorn. It says an ox. But oxes back then, if you looked at a picture of an old ox, which is a big beefy thing, its horn basically was one massive thing that went out like this. So the horn, the two horns, they did come together here, but they were fused. So it was one horn. So that was the unihorn. That was the unicorn. So I had to explain that to the guy, because otherwise he would have been running around thinking that he was running around with Care Bears or something like this. So, but so the NLT here, it says, "Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong." It's interesting that the line "stand firm in the faith" and "be strong" is very, very consistent. So there's no ambiguity there. As what the translators are looking at this going, no, there's no other way to translate this. Yeah. So, and "stand firm in the faith" is also all the same. Now the Message Bible, which was done by Eugene Peterson, some of you would have the Message. It's a paraphrase. It is not a translation. Okay, so I would say don't use the Message as your main study Bible, but it is good for things like this, just to get a bit of a different sort of swing on it. So keep your eyes open, hold tight to your convictions, give it all you've got, be resolute. Okay, so I understand that language. It does, sort of give a bit of flavor to what's going on. It does describe, being on your guard, being alert, yeah, keep your eyes open, so that's very visual. Hold tight to your convictions. I understand that, but I'm not quite sure if that's the best sort of translation there, and I'll explain that later. Give it all you've got. It's, get in there, be brave, so, we understand that's a very contemporary language. Be resolute, which is, stick at it, so. Then the Living Bible finally, which was a fairly big paraphrase version back in the 70s and 80s. You wouldn't sort of see too much of the Living Bible these days in terms of general circulation, but I thought it was good. It says, "Keep your eyes open for spiritual danger." That's how that bit is about being watchful, being on your guard is translated. Stay true to the Lord. Act like men, be strong. So those are just, a handful of other English versions. Now I haven't, there's about the same amount of other English versions that I don't have here. There's loads of them. so, there's the New Century version, there's the, today's English version, there's the Good News version, there's the, was it the True Life, version? That's that sort of Messianic Jewish, version, which is quite good. So, yes, now the NIV, the people that have produced the NIV, Zondervan, have kind of gone down this road where they've wanted to produce a translation that was gender neutral, when it came to God and that kind of stuff. So that is this, kind of NIV of the 21st century sort of hoo-ha. Don't go there. That no.
That Living Bible was the first part from the King James away years and years and years ago that I had, and I found it quite.
Mhm.
What did you say?
Yeah.
The living Bible, I
Yeah.
King James, but
Yeah,
especially when it comes to the book of Revelation,
yeah.
I refer to the
Yeah.
living Bible.
Yeah. So, yeah, it can clarify certain things, but I wouldn't make a sort of steady diet of it, So, oh, right, okay, well, the Zondervan's run by a bunch of Jewish businessmen, so anyway. Right, okay, so these are the exhortations. There's 5 of them. So each slide is going to be dedicated to a particular encouragement. So the first one is watch. Okay, so that's the first one that's on the agenda here, which is watch. And so basically what it sort of lends itself to is being on guard, and in the sense, don't be sleeping on, at the wheel, so so somebody who is on guard is alert, their eyes are open, they're looking for, the enemy, as it were, just watching for, anything that is amiss. I remember going to the tomb of the unknown soldier in Arlington, Virginia, where I used to live. And my mother took me there to watch the changing of the guard of the tomb of the unknown soldier. Now, I don't know, did you go? Yeah, you went to it. Some exercise. And so every hour during the day, the Marine guard that is posted there walks backward and forward between the crowd and the tomb. Now, the tomb is maybe up until recently, has always been like the largest piece of marble, carved marble in the world. It's like, an amazing piece of stuff. But anyway, he would, go up and down, and he would always keep his rifle toward the crowd. So when he changed and walked back, he would, change shoulders, but it was very, very precise, very regimented. And, but you could see, by looking at the eyes of the man, he was aware of everything that was going on. So, but the big deal was with the tourists and all that was the changing of the guard. So when they did this every hour on the hour, where a sergeant would be coming with the replacement, and he would examine the gun to make sure that it was in working order. And it was, it was so robotic looking. It was amazing, and then he would present it to the guard that was taking the place of the other man. And they went through all this gyration about, how he would fit into, because they had to keep the marching going, and so this was 24 hours a day. And so even during the rain, in bad weather, snow, whatever, didn't matter. There was always the guard there doing his thing. And yeah. So this was there was a tomb there with the remains of people that didn't know, from many wars. So
See that on YouTube.
You would.
oh well,
Yeah.
yeah. So
The inspection of the weapon, how they pulled the boat down and.
Yeah.
But it just, you couldn't do it like it.
no. So but the thing that impressed me about that was the vigilance to detail, and in fact, what the sergeant would say as he was coming with his replacement soldier, because there would be a lot of kids at the chain, where because you didn't go, beyond the chain. And he would say, "Halt, your children from the chain." It's just like, and all the kids that were there were just like, it's just, everybody, it was just pure silence, just everybody stopped, and, so, but there was no sleeping. The guard that was there during the night, and they would change the guard every 2 hours during the night. So, so the exhortation here is, see in your life, you need to watch what's going on. You need to be aware of your surroundings.
You have to watch for it.
Yes, yeah.
And, predating views and watching.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because if you lose kind of track, and I find it interesting too, that if I'm doing something through the week, I'm usually pretty alert. But see, when I get to a church, for some reason, tiredness just goes bloop, and just drops over, you're just gone, and you're just struggling sometimes. I do, with staying alert. It's almost like the devil's like, I am going to drop little fairy dust on top of your head, and so, but how important it is to stay alert. Now, the Corinthians were not alert to spiritual pitfalls, and they ended up then becoming quite indifferent. It was like, oh, well, whatever, doesn't matter. And so this promoted a misunderstanding of doctrine, meaning teaching, and a misuse of gifts and blessings from God. So they were gifted people, but they misused their gifts because they weren't watching. Their focus wasn't correct. God gave them blessings, but then they used that as means of looking at each other and saying, "Oh, you got that, but I got this." And so it was all this kind of one-upmanship and all this stuff. And then they didn't see then the spiritual pitfalls. They didn't see the fact that they were being, blasé about things, because they were going to the Lord's table drunk. They were off doing things that just weren't right. And then there was the man who had the sexual relationship with his stepmom, which was real creeped out. And everybody's going, "Oh, well, sure. Well, they're at church, aren't they? They're great, super, whatever." Yeah.
Forgive me for something like this, let me think, but could there be like a modern day, like a church mystery shopper? To go into the church, see what the problems are, and then tell the pastors, maybe a wee bit like all the gospel that are only incognito.
Yeah.
Does that exist?
Yeah. My brother had a job like that, not in a church, but he was a mystery shopper. Went into a department store. He was hired by the department store to go and sort of see things and see how and inspect how customer service went and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, no. So if you find a perfect one, don't go to it because you'll make it imperfect. So yeah. So Paul doesn't, I don't think, see that it's necessary to do that kind of thing, to kind of, put a little hoodie on or something and go into, so because what Paul is saying, look, you need to be watchful. This is the stuff that you all are dealing with because you're a messed up church, messy church. So, address those things. And so the final exhortation really is reflecting back on all this stuff, saying you got to be watchful.
For the sake of accountability.
Yeah, sure.
You said something there earlier on, which is interesting, and it's to be on the look for something out of the ordinary or different.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I think is key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because a lot of things my job, that's what you would have, you may not be looking for a particular thing, and if you were, you may not find it.
Mm-hmm.
But you would see something that, how do you know something's wrong? Because you see that it's not the way it should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think whenever you listen to these prosperity people on some of these people on the radio, but a lot of what they say is okay.
Yeah.
But then you see these wee bits that are.
Yeah, well, and this is why the Bible says test all things, and test the spirits to see whether they're from God and that kind of thing. you know, I remember the story about the Banbridge bomb in 80 or 98 that was here, and about the policeman that identified that there was a bomb in the town, which then there was a warning and then everybody cleared and all that kind of stuff. But what he did was he noticed that there was a car sitting just a bit low in the back. And that was because it had a, you know, a big 500-pound bomb sitting in the thing, you know. So, you know, so he was alert to things that were amiss. Now, most everybody else in the population around Banbridge wouldn't have known anything. But yet,
What country family and Bobby in the country, somebody might know them, and the Finnegans and more, and they were always kicking up our numbers.
yeah,
Wee Bobby drove a minivan, and Billy was a big, strong fella, and you always knew if Billy was in the van because you see the bottoms down to one side.
yeah. That was just because he was a big man, you know, so anyway, so, but, you know, one of the things that I find interesting too is, in the States, when they're dealing with counterfeit money, it's dealt with by the Secret Service. And so the Secret Service are the people that go and hound out all the counterfeiters and so on. But how those people are trained is they are trained on genuine money. They are not shown counterfeit bills. They're not shown anything that is, you know, quote, out of the ordinary. They are shown what the real thing is. So they know the real thing. So therefore, anything that is outside of the real thing, which is a whole range of stuff, they will then know. You know, so
The problem is that you had to show them all the different things that could be outside the norm.
oh gosh,
You're looking at loads of things.
yeah, and that's confusion. Yeah, so it's the same thing with the Christian walk. Know your God, know your walk, know your Bible, because if you don't know these things, counterfeits will then come, and you'll go, oh, whatever.
Yeah, sure, yeah,
Yeah.
there's the weak and the tares are in the church,
Yeah.
they gather and they look the same, they do the same,
Yeah.
you don't know the difference.
Mhm. So,
Just really, this is maybe going off the track a wee bit. You know, when it says, "Depart from me, I never knew you,"
mhm.
and it's, you know, I've done miracles in your name.
Yeah.
How if you're not, how do they have the power to do that?
Well, Satan has power of deception, you know, and he's able to probably create things that people would then interpret as a miracle. You know, it's like like these boys that do faith healing and all that kind of stuff. They'll, you know, Benny Hinn and all that crap. It's sleight of hand, you know, it's magician stuff. You know, so
Or leg, slide of
Yeah.
hand, see if you watch them, it's just.
so, you know, so when people see that, they go, oh, there's a miracle, you know, and these guys would say, didn't we do miracles? Well, no, it was living nonsense, you know, because they, you know, got some guy, planted somebody who, you know, theoretically had a bum leg or something like that, and then is able to take the cane and say, yeah, this guy, I can throw it out now, you know.
It's like
So-
Pharaoh's ministers never went to Pharaoh.
Yeah,
They threw it in his rod, they were able to.
they were able to do that too. I mean, there was a whole demonic sort of field there where,
Say, or am I mixing this up? I cast out demons in your name.
mhm.
Yeah.
So,
How to do that?
yeah, well, we're probably getting into a whole nother world there, but anyway. So, now this is what, Spiros Zodhiates says. Okay, now Spiros Zodhiates, was a Greek scholar, and this is what he said about this word watch. He says, a mindfulness of threatening dangers, which with conscious, earnestness and alert mind keeps it from all drowsiness and all slackening in the energy of faith and conduct. The general attitude of alertness on the part of the Christian believer in the view of actual or imminent tests of the spiritual life. Now that's a real mouthful, okay? You know, but you know, selecting a few words out of there is you know, an alert mind, you know, keeping it, you know, from drowsiness, you know, alertness, you know, and because there's the view of actual or imminent tests, meaning that there are things that are in our lives, sometimes they're there now. There's things that come down the road that we can see in the distance. Those are the imminent things. And so it's being alert to those things. So this is a very, very important word, so in the light of messy church here. And then finally, just to sort of get on to what you were talking about earlier, we are to be alert for Satan. We are to be alert for temptation. We are to be alert for apathy and indifference. We're to be alert for false teachers, but positively, we're to be alert for the Lord's return. Okay, so there's negative things to be alert for, but there's one very, very big positive thing to be alert for, and that is the coming of Jesus Christ. Now, Jesus wants us to be prepared. He wants us to be ready. You don't want to be caught with your proverbial trousers around your legs, So,
I think we sometimes forget that.
yeah.
The Lord's coming back.
Yeah.
We can be wrapped up in other
Yeah.
things, and that's the ready to.
And this is why communion is such an important thing too, because the Lord said this, do this until I come, so that's the word watch there. So we'll now move on to the line steadfast, stand fast in the faith. Okay, so which means to persevere or to persist in the truth of Christ. So persevering is this idea of planting yourself. It's if you think about being in the surf or being in the waves, if you just kind of stand there without sort of planting yourself into the sand, you'll be washed away very quickly. But if you plant yourself, you'll be able to stand better. So it's this idea of perseverance. It's the idea of persistence, and persistence is a commitment. You're not just standing there for a quick little, photo op or something like this. This is, being there for the long haul. And the truth of Christ is there for your long-term benefit, not some short-term thing. So the Corinthians were wavering because they were sidetracked in their convictions. This led to wrong thinking, wrong belief, and subsequently wrong behavior. Because if you're thinking wrong, you'll believe wrong, which will then lead to wrong exercise, wrong, actions. So, and the problem with their convictions is that, well, they didn't have too many. They weren't really, a conviction is a very, very deep-seated thing. But you have to make sure that your conviction is in the right thing, because you can have a conviction that's just completely wrong, So it's this idea too of being constant. And when I was in high school and university, one of the things that I studied was engineering and computer science and all that kind of stuff. But I always found there was three main physical sciences that people dealt with. One was biology, two was chemistry, and the third was physics. Biology was one of those things, was a bit hairy-fairy in the sense that, generally that's how it worked, but not all the time. So there was always a variation with how things worked within biology. I'm talking about plants and animals and all that kind of stuff. Then you came up to chemistry. Chemistry was a lot more predictable, but there were some things that just were like, why does that do that? Generally, things that turn into a solid get heavier, not lighter. But if you took water and you froze it, which means it turns into a solid, guess what it does? It's lighter. It actually floats. Good. So if you could imagine if the principle of a solid being heavier worked for ice, all the ice would sink to the bottom of the ocean. So it doesn't sit on top. But anyway, so there's these kind of anomalies, these kind of strange things going. But I see physics is constant. That works, no doubt. What works down here in the earth works, a million miles away in space. Same thing. All the principles work, so the principles of Scripture work. They don't deviate, they don't vary. God doesn't go, well, we'll make this work for you because it kind of is and thing. But see your person over there, it's a different sort of kettle of fish and we'll apply it differently or something like that. So, the principles of God apply across the board. Now, how they get applied, on the surface might look a bit different, but at the end of the day, it's for the purpose of establishing us in the sound doctrine of God, so, and the devil wants to undermine that constantly, so there's another constant, that the devil is, constantly being bad that way. Yes, yeah. Now, there's the difference here between in faith and in the faith. All right. So because what the line is here is it says stand fast in the faith. Okay, it's not standing fast in faith, because you could have faith in a lot of different things. But this is talking about the faith. So in Greek, there is what is referred to as the definite article, and the definite article is our word the, which is what I have underlined there. So, if I was talking about the stool there, that is that stool. Okay. Now, if I'm talking about a stool, that could be any of them stools, so it could be a whole variety of different things. So Paul is saying, look, it's not about faith just in this general thing. I remember sitting with a guy one time who had a drug problem, and he says, I struggle with having faith in faith. I was like, what? But I understood sort of where he was coming from, because he was struggling with religion in general, and he would have seen in his own life, oh, I've tried that really doesn't work, so I'm struggling to have faith in the idea that faith works. Well, if you have faith that the door is your God and that's going to help you in your life or something like that, well, yeah, I guess you'll be disappointed. So faith in that will not work.
Paul says in Corinthians, doesn't he, that the Christians examine yourself to see if you're in the faith.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So really it boils down to this is not about a trusting faith. When Paul's talking about stand fast in the faith, it's not about salvation faith. It is about faith in the established truth and content of the gospel. So because a lot of us know what it is to be saved, to put our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, but then it is a whole nother thing that goes beyond that allows you to say, right, am I trusting what his word says, so that it will help me in my day-to-day living? So, and there are then the convictions that are associated with that. So because if you're filled with the Spirit of God, if the Word of God is dwelling within you richly with wisdom, then the Spirit of God has opportunity then to resurrect and raise up to you, okay, I'm faced up with a decision to make about, do I choose to do right or choose to do wrong? And so the Spirit of God will say, well, the answer is in the Scriptures. This is what it is. This is what you should be convicted about. The Spirit of God convicts you of that and says, right, I will then choose what is right. And then there's a blessing in doing what's right. See, when you go and do what's wrong,
There used to be a wee saying, I haven't heard people say it here, but it was a lot in Belfast. There's a lot of people that come up with, some Christians that says, you talk the talk, but you don't walk the walk.
Yeah.
You can talk the talk, but you definitely don't walk the walk.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
Christians like that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They do all the talk.
Yeah. So, and then just finally on this particular screen, so second Thessalonians 2:15 says, therefore, brethren, stand fast and hold the traditions which you were taught, whether by word or our epistle. So Paul had gone into the Thessalonian church and he had taught them, in person, and then he also wrote to them. So he, wrote out instruction, but he says, look, you stand fast and you hold to these traditions that you were taught. So sometimes we hear the word tradition and we buck up against it and we go, no, tradition's bad. But no, actually tradition's very, very good. But the problem is that some traditions of men, and Jesus taught against that kind of stuff because people were then waylaid by all kinds of religious practice, so that's so we have watch and we have stand fast in the faith. Now we've gone through 2 phrases and it's taken us 45 minutes to do that. So now we have 3 more to go. Right. Okay. So the next one is be brave or act like men. Okay. So
Said that if you
hmm?
is someone because like and you said not all men are brave. Yeah.
Well, I would say there's probably men out there that are a bit mousy, but now what you have to understand is that act like men, okay, is what we would refer to as an idiom, okay? It is a saying. Now, back then, okay, in Greek times, those times in which Paul lived, acting like a man meant that you stood out there, you were courageous, you got stuck into it, and exhibited what you should exhibit. And yeah. So, I would say if they had a phrase, act like a woman or something like that, that probably back then would have been seen as, being a bit prissy or being a bit sort of, down low or something like this, so, it wouldn't have been seen as an example of stalwartness and getting in there. So now, in our day and age, maybe acting, saying act like a man may have different sorts of connotations, so that's why probably more recent versions of the Bible would say, be brave. Okay. So
could you give that to the likes of David and Goliath?
Yeah.
So
David was brave. David was courageous. David was acting like a man. So he wasn't cowering like Saul. And flip me, Saul was like running the other direction. So. But anyway, it's to behave with wisdom and courage, to use a term that we understand, to man up, i.e., to grow up. Okay, so what this is really about is more about maturity. It's about being mature, not being a kid. So again, the Corinthians were behaving badly and being a poor example. They were timid in things concerning sound doctrine and practice, such as moral purity, personal relationships, and emotional stability. So, because there's all the conversations there about marriage, about sexual moral, well, a lot of them were immoral, but there was the discussion about morality, the personal relationships of marriage relationships and different things, and emotional stability that would sort of remind me of people were saying, oh, I'm of Paul, I like him. No, I don't like Paul, I like Apollos. Apollos, he seemed to be a guy that was sort of, took a good stand. I like him. And then there were other people saying, well, I like Peter. Huh? No, that hasn't changed at all. And then there was the overly spiritual people that were saying, but I'm of Christ. I don't follow these people. I'm so there was all. But what happens there is that you then put into those people your emotion and you find strength in them, and when those people falter, which they will, which they do, because we all sin, we goof up, then you get disillusioned, and you go, gosh, I thought he was really great or she was really good and I was really weighing in behind them and they were a good example. Well, praise the Lord that they were a good example to you, but they're also the same as you. You know, so, and being in full-time Christian work, it's, you think you have your spiritual superstars out there, and then you tend to venerate them, you tend to lift them up, and then they go and they falter and they run away or do something, and they let you down, and then you get disillusioned about God. So yeah. So anyway, let me just.
People that you do look up to, you should be looking up to them, not because of who they are.
Yeah, but yeah,
Because you would be looking up to them because how they relate to the Bible and how they relate to God's word.
yeah.
So
So
once they go away from that, you
Yeah.
just gotta accept, well.
see, this is why the Bible says that God's goal for us, his predestination of us, is to be conformed to the image of Christ, not the image of somebody else. So right. So it's about being mature as opposed to being baby-like. Okay, so and so Paul's asking us, look, assess yourself. Where are you? It's okay to do that. Because we're all on a journey. And that's what I do with the people I work with, is I journey with them. And as I was thinking about the fellow that died up in Belfast, there was like I was on a train journey with him, and we were sitting in the same compartment, and we're going along in life together, but Jesus was in that compartment too. And there was a point where Jesus says to Michael, look, sorry, I'm going to stop the train now. You come with me. We're getting a taxi out to my house. So, and I wasn't privy to that. I didn't know that. So I'm still in the carriage going, where are they going? So, but that's for Jesus to know, not for me. So, and, but sometimes we throw the toys out of the prom, we spit the dummy out, and we go, yeah, but so, sorry. Yeah, throw the dummy out. Yeah, mine's green. See, mine can turn red too. So.
As far as I can see, he didn't regard himself as a great leader, he regarded himself as the least and the servant.
Yeah.
And for me, that means that we're not meant to look up to. Servants were never looked up to.
Yeah.
I thought
So,
that's what the reason Paul regarded
Yeah.
himself as servants.
Yes, and in fact, I was reading there earlier about Paul in 1st or 2nd Corinthians 12 there, where he talks about having been caught up into the third heaven and seeing things that were unspeakable and that he could not articulate them. And that was at that point he was given the thorn in the flesh. So that was basically saying, look, you've seen stuff here, and it's not for you to go and articulate that at this time. So
Just show you too, really, Paul won't even speak about the things he's seen, but your
Yeah.
guys and I go to have every 10 minutes.
yeah,
Yeah.
Done this, that, and the other.
Never believes that.
Yeah.
Never, nobody explained to have.
yeah, no,
And they're speaking of what the same and what the
Yeah.
done up for, so
Yeah.
that's how you know what's like. Paul didn't even speak about it.
So now I want to talk about the difference between self-confidence and what I call God confidence. Because one thing that the world and a lot of people in church would say is that you need self-confidence. If you lack confidence, what you need is self-confidence. Now, that sounds good. It's a bit like when people talk about, oh, you have bad self-esteem, so you need good self-esteem. What's the common word with all that stuff? Self. So, look, the confidence that we need to have is not in self. But the world and a lot of people in the church would say self-confidence is good. And so you have Paul here saying, be brave, act like a man, be confident. Well, okay, confidence is good, but is it in yourself or is it in God? So because if it is in yourself, that's why Paul said back in chapter 10, if a man thinks he stands, let him take heed lest he fall. So we have to, sometimes we have to watch the sort of language that we adopt and use. It sounds good. It sounds legitimate. And that's how the devil sort of acts sometimes. He gives us legitimate sounding sorts of ideas. And the prosperity people will dish all that stuff around all over the place, But really, it's about having confidence in God. God is the one that holds you up. God is the one that shores you up. So you can't hold yourself together. So because the Bible says he upholds all things by the word of his power. So you are part of all things. So you can take your name and put it in there and say, well, he upholds Woody by the word of his power. He holds up Siobhan by the word of his power, and so on, So now scriptures say in 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17, very well-known verse. So the scriptures provide for growth, for maturity. So all scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine or teaching, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete and thoroughly equipped for every good work. So that this is how we mature. This is how we grow up. And there's a whole pile of other verses that would lend itself to this, but I like this one because it's quite concise. Because what Paul is saying here is he's saying you need to get teaching. You need to hear where you're to go, but through that teaching, you will hear where you've messed up, and that's about reproof. And all of us have messed up, and that's fine. That's okay. But there's correction, which shows you how to get from being messed up. And then the instruction in righteousness is how to keep yourself from messing up again. Okay. So, how many of us have been going around in circles? We do a bad thing and then we come back around, put our tail between our legs, sort it out. And then we do it wrong again. And then we put our tail between our legs and we come back around. And then we do it wrong again. We put our tail between our legs, and so it's, and we're going nowhere, So, but then what we have to take on board, well, what is God saying in order to keep you from doing this? So when I sit with people and people tell me about all the bad things of the day in terms of how they relapsed or whatever, I'm not going to sit there and go and beat them up, because they've already beat themselves up about the thing. So there's no sense in me going and clattering them over the head with the 2x4, so would you say a 4x2? So that's God's job. So you bring the word of God, they get convicted about it, they get corrected, and then they go, I know what I need to do now to keep myself right. So that's all in and around this be brave or act like men. So now the fourth one here is be strong. Okay, so and that is a passive word. Okay, so now in language you have two types of what's called voices, which is you either have an active voice or you have a passive voice. And an active one is something that you do. Okay, so that the activity is on your part, you do the thing. Whereas being passive, it is something that is done to you. Okay, so active is something you do. Passive is something is done to you. Okay, so when Paul is saying here, be strong, he is not saying, okay, go and muster up strength from within yourself and you go and do this thing. No, he realizes that within the man, within the woman, that there is no good thing. So we don't have the ability to be strong in that sense. So we need strength to come from the outside. So that's why it says to be strengthened, to be established. It's not to be strong or to in that sense or to establish yourself. It is allowing something from the outside to strengthen you, to establish you. Yes. So, and it can't be from a self-reliant source. It must come externally from God. So now when the pastor's been on the Wednesday nights talking about the spiritual armor, where there's that verse, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. The word strength in his might is the same word as this word here for that's translated strong. Okay. So the other word strong and be strong in the Lord, that's a different Greek word, but anyway. But basically it's, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Okay. So because what the Corinthians were doing was they were self-reliant when it came to foolishness, and that is Greek wisdom, and carnality, meaning that they were operating in the flesh. So their whole church exercise was all just about what they thought was right, and whatever they thought was right was however they got on. They just didn't get it. So what they did then is like, oh, well, we don't really understand what's going on, so we'll just try our best and we'll do it the Greek way. So, and that's what they were doing. They were bringing all their Greek ideas, all their Roman ideas, all their pagan ideas into the church and saying to the pastor at the place, well, what do you think about this? This is all really good. And, maybe the leader at the time was like, well, yeah, I guess it sort of seems to work. It seems to work out in the world, but we're at a different standard. If you remember back in the Old Testament, David, when we talked about this when we were doing life lessons in Chronicles, when David was bringing the ark back to Jerusalem, he brought it on a cart. Now, the ark doesn't get transported in a cart. It gets carried, by particular priests with poles and, all that stuff. But David, in his immaturity, was looking back at how the Philistines got on and how they carted the cart or carted the ark around, which was in a cart. Okay. It didn't seem that they had much of a problem other than anywhere the ark went, that there were problems, but they didn't get zapped. They were just, so really what God was doing was he's like, they're pagan people. They don't know any better. But the ark of God needs to come back to Jerusalem. So here's the godly man then going, oh, well, that seems to work. So we'll do the same thing. That don't work because that's not how God prescribed it. Has to be carried. So David figured that out. He went back to the Bible. He read the Bible and he says, oh, this is how this is supposed to be done. I got it wrong to begin with. I now will get it right. So we will carry it on poles. And so there was a blessing in that. But when you do it wrong, guess what? His buddy Ohio, or not Ohio, but Uzzah, he bought the farm and got fried. So
I think it'd be saying you should know better.
Yeah.
They
So
don't know any better, so.
yeah. But all of us are at various maturity levels, and we do have to give latitude for that because sometimes we don't get it right because we just don't know. And so that's fine, but let's seek to encourage each other, help each other to move on in the right ways. Because sometimes we do get a bit thick about it and we go, see them ones? They're not doing it right. What's their problem? That's awful with that, and we get very, very judgmental about that. Now I understand that. But sometimes we have to look at our own journey and say, I was like that one time, so, when I was young, a lot of you wouldn't believe this, but I used to be a very, very obstinate, angry piece of work, and I would tell people like it was, I called a spade, and it didn't matter to me what people thought about that. And I mean, I would criticize people publicly and do all sorts of stuff, and but that was my immaturity back when I was 20 something, so God's helped me with that, to find a bit of latitude. So
Wisdom then, don't you?
yes, and that's what it's about. It's about God's wisdom. So Colossians 1:10 through 11 says that you may walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing him, being fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, strengthened with all might according to his glorious power, for all patience and long suffering with joy. Now, again, there's a verse that you could talk about for the next sort of few years probably, but anyway, but just to highlight the word strengthen in there, it's about God strengthening you with all might, because that word strengthen comes from God. It's not from men.
And he asked, like, would you say that you can walk worthy of the Lord? That's like what you say, walk the walk and talk the talk.
So now, lastly here, is let all that you do be done with love. Okay. And so this love that's being talked about here is agape love. That's the Greek word agape or agape. And that's a love that comes from God. It is not natural human love. Okay. This is not the kind of stuff that comes from yourself. You know, in Greek, there was 3 other types of love that were discussed, one of which was used in the Bible, philos, but there was 2 others, storge and eros. And eros was a romantic love, or it's where we get the word erotic from. So it's, you know, it's physical, it's sexual, it's you know. Yeah, so the Cupid sort of thing, yes. So yeah, Cupid hitting your bum and going, oh, you know. So and yeah, yes. What was what did thingy sing? You know, the Osmond, Donny Osmond. Yeah, puppy love.
Yeah, popular.
You know, so and I remember watching them shows, Donny and Marie. You know, desperate. You know, cat. Dear love your husband. You know, it's a. Didn't he give a cow for you or something? What was the whole story about that? I thought he bartered with something. No, maybe that's a complete apocryphal story that I've heard. Anyway, we'll not go there. That's all right. So and the other sorts of loves, storge and philos, are family, friendship love. You know, philos is where we get the word the name Philadelphia from, which was the city of brotherly love. You know, that kind of stuff. But agape love was actually a concept that was introduced into Greek by Christians, because the other words for love just didn't measure up. So right. So this is the driver that makes watchfulness, okay, which is the first thing we talked about, steadfastness, courage, and strength actually work. So if we have love in our lives, love that comes from God, then these other things we can do. But see, if it's all driven by another kind of love, or by lust, or, you know, some other counterfeit or something like that, see, being watchful, being steadfast, being courageous or strong, or any of those kinds of things, they're not based then, they're not underpinned by spiritual things. So so just to finish off here, what MacArthur says, and I found this very helpful. He says, love complements and balances everything else. It is beautiful and softening. It is the beautiful softening principle. It keeps our firmness from becoming hardness, and our strength from becoming domineering. It keeps our maturity gentle and considerate. It keeps our right doctrine from becoming obstinate dogmatism, and our right living from becoming smug self-righteousness. So again, another kind of big statement, big mouthful of stuff, but I think it sort of puts things into perspective here, because, you know, Paul spent an awful lot of time in this book talking about love, because they didn't get it right. The messy church had it wrong. They were all looking at themselves and criticizing everybody. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, and that's one of the things that, you know, I pray sometimes, you know, that the love of God would constrain me, the love of God would compel me, that the love of God would control me. You know, I need that, because if I try to do it on my own bat, it's just not gonna work, you know. So, but you talk to God about these things, because you know you're not going to get it right, but God says, I want to get it right with you. So here it is. So, and as you talk to God about that and you pray to God about these things, God says, absolutely, those are the things I want to do. And so I believe that if you pray this, you say, Lord, help me to be watchful. Lord, help me to stand fast in the faith. Lord, help me to be brave. Help me to be strong. And that all that I do be done with love. And I guarantee that if you pray that prayer before God and talk to God about this, God will start to do it in your life. And you'll see a difference.
Suppose as well, but like, you know, if there's conferences putting on the armor of Christ, doesn't it as well?
Yes, sure, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So but you know, the thing about these 5 things is they are expansive. You know, you could spend a whole day just talking to God about how to be watchful. You know, because God will then show you, good thing you're talking to me about that, because you see your neighbor or see the person you're working with or see your family member, see what they're saying and how that gets into your crawl. You have to be watchful for that. You know, so God then highlights these things to you. So, but obviously you have to be a Christian. Obviously you have to be a one that is in the family of God. See, if you're outside of the family of God, no, this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really work.
Because we
So-
show that love because God loved us first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
That's another thing, if you see an unloved